Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
Ow! Ow!
You really should stop sticking your finger in PowerPoints.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development. To realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
David, that was a colourful opening to the show on purpose, because we're talking about the wild creature mind in the person segment. And that's because we have forgotten in the West, typically, that we do have an animal aspect to our nature.
Yeah, and even more than an animal aspect, we have a body that gives us all sorts of information about how our body and our brain are doing in the world.
And we're referring, of course, to a book by Steve Biddulph. He's a well-regarded psychologist in Australia. I first encountered his work many years ago in the 90s with a book called Manhood that he wrote. And he's had one on raising children, raising girls, raising boys. He's been around the block a number of times, very popular man, and he's got a great reflective sense to his approach to psychology in making it grounded in practicality. And this latest book, Wild Creature Mind, is, I guess, it's taking as its core material some of the latest thinking in the realms of neuroscience, which is shining a light more brightly on what the heck is going on with the right side of our brain and the left side of our brain. David, how would you nutshell his main findings? And I bet you, listen out, he's going to mention the vagus nerve.
I can, but I think the really important thing is the example he starts the book with, and that is of a 14-year-old girl having a full-blown panic attack because her anxiety is utterly out of control.
Why don't we have a listen to that?
Annika woke with a start. It was the middle of the night, and she'd been deeply asleep. There were muffled sounds, human sounds, coming from somewhere in the house. She stumbled out of bed and went to investigate. Then, suddenly, she realised what the sound was, and her heart sank like an icy stone. It was her daughter. She found 14-year-old Ellie lying on the cold bathroom tiles, moaning and rocking, her face and nightdress soaked with tears. Annika gathered Ellie up in her arms and held her, as her sobbing grew more desperate before slowly calming. "It's all right. I'm here. Let it out." Through her tears, Ellie croaked, "I'm sorry, Mum. I didn't want to wake you." Annika murmured that she would always want her to come to her, any time, day or night. Ellie had been struggling in recent months. She'd become anxious and withdrawn, with no appetite or energy, but couldn't say why. Nothing Annika suggested seemed to help. They'd been to the doctor and talked to the school. She had suffered similar problems a few years earlier and seen a couple of different psychologists, but the problems had never really gone away. This time they were lucky. It only took 2 weeks to get Ellie in to see a counsellor. They knew of families who had waited for months. Now, as Annika looked up, she could see her daughter coming out of the health centre doors and heading back to the car. Amazingly, there was a bounce in her step, and she swung easily into the passenger seat. "Mum, she was really nice, not like the other psychologists. She gets me." Ellie looked different. She had some colour in her face and her eyes were bright. "And guess what? I have a baby tiger inside me." Annika must have looked a bit baffled. "Don't worry, I'm not psycho. It's a metaphor, Mum. Well, not exactly a metaphor. I'll tell you more, but first, can we go and get some food? I'm starving.
So I think that this is lovely that in the same year that Jonathan Haidt has written about the anxious generation and what practical things we can do in the world to help young people and to reduce anxiety, that we now have a book like Wild Creature Mind explaining what we can do practically for anyone who is getting overwhelmed by big negative emotions. And that one of the biggest things we can do is relearn to listen to our body. And as Steve said, the vagus nerve plays a critical role in this, because the vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in the body. It's connected to all our organs, it's connected to all our sensory organs, and it collects all the information about all the sensations we feel in our body and all the sensory information that we absorb through our five senses to process to make sense of the world. And it doesn't use words, it uses felt sensation. So when you're worried about that meeting tomorrow and you get that knot in your stomach, when you're excited and you get butterflies, when you're feeling stressed and it feels like your ears are attached to your shoulders, these are all signals that your body is sending you, telling you, hey, pay attention, there's stuff going on here that I've let you know that you need to do something about this, so please do something before I have to give you a big emotion like anxiety or depression or sadness or rage.
He makes a really interesting observation. He says, let's say, for example, you're feeling tense in the chest, for example, and your temperature is higher, and he said, we think to ourselves, oh, we're angry, that's why we're feeling this. But he's actually saying it's the other way around. It's because we're feeling this, it's how it's manifesting in the body. That's actually how we know that we're angry.
Yep, the felt sensation always comes before the named emotion. So think how many times you've heard a joke and you're smiling and laughing before you actually really have worked out the punchline.
What happens a lot around me with people.
Some of the time, yeah.
And what are you saying? You're saying the body's picked up on the gist?
Body's faster at processing whatever the story or the joke is than the verbal part of our brain is, the language part is, which is in our left hemisphere.
And look, the way I describe it from having read the book, I'm halfway through my second reading of it now, is the right-hand side of the brain is non-verbal. It doesn't use words. It can't use words. It's taking, at the speed of light, every sensation and responding as it needs to protect us or whatever the case might be. And it's the left side of the brain that is, I picture it as more of a funnel that all this data has to be squeezed through to the realm of words to be acknowledged and expressed, which is how we have been groomed in the West and shrunken down to.
For hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So listeners, if you're interested, the classic book on this is from 2010 called The Master and His Emissary, all about the differences between left and right brain and about how from the Enlightenment onwards, mental health has been declining in the Western world at the same pace we have privileged language and logic over being connected to our body in the world.
And so this book, Wild Creature Mind, the way I advocate for it is to say it reminds us to validate this lost sense of ours. It's still there, but has been ignored until it overwhelms us because it's an emergency. And I have noticed just in the last couple of weeks, David, I even said to you this week, we got approached by some people to do some work, and there was just this sense I had that, I don't know, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for us. And that was, instead of just having an abstract feeling and pushing on and staying with the words and processing it, I've said, I actually think that this is actually not going to be a big fit. Now my words are connected. And so his big point is you don't suddenly go, forget the left side of the brain, it's a waste of time, let's all go right. It's about having them operate in balance, which is why this is in the person segment. This is about calibrating ourselves so we have the more powerful version of all our capacity at our fingertips, literally.
So to bring it down to a single concept that's applicable every day in small business, clever words aren't going to connect with someone as well as being relaxed, being comfortable in your own skin, being aware of whether they're comfortable, and then talking to them about the thing they're interested in. When we're at our best, left and right hemispheres of our brain are working together. We're aware of our body, our environment. We're aware of other people. Do they seem comfortable? So if there's a choice to just be clever or to be connected and a bit clever, take connected and a bit clever.
Which actually is very interesting because it ties back to, the episode before this one, we spoke about Robert Ringer and the book Winning Through Intimidation, which one of his main lessons was about posture, of posturing with confidence. And I guess this is a pigeon pair of that, isn't it? Is being able to go into a new environment, a networking event or whatever it might be, and be at peace with yourself and trust your animal instinct, as I like to call it, that side to, it's monitoring everything, but being aware of it and going with that and trusting it. At one point in the book, he describes it as you're walking along and you've got this pet, I think he says a pet wolf or something.
Yeah, I think it's a panther.
A panther.
Panther at that point
just
in the book.
by your side. And to have that confidence that that's looking out for you, your left side's looking out for you, and together you're a pretty dominant. Dominant's not even the right word. It's formidable, comfortable in your own skin because you can trust your gut once again.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
In the principles segment, I want to pick up on that about going to a room full of strangers and being comfortable, because I had to do that last week at the time of recording. I was invited to the Polaris Centre at Mawson Lakes. Sasha and the team, Janet and the team down there, and I was doing a talk on the magic of marketing. So I did know some people that were there, but they're all new people. It was great having read Wild Creature Mind to just be there. That was certainly one way just to feel comfortable. And the other way was, I think I talked about this last season in our podcast, of trying to find the mindset when you're going to be a speaker, of not going there to put on a dog and pony show. You're actually going there to earnestly try to be of value, and that just shifts things around so you get a bit more centered. So that was all good. But the reason I wanted to bring this up in the principles segment is there was an interesting illustration when I'd done my talk and the floor was open to questions, because the first question I got was, how many followers do we have on Instagram? That was the first question. And then the second question was from a woman who is a bookkeeper saying, how would I apply any of this to bookkeeping? I can't think of any way to come up with some of this entertaining stuff for bookkeeping. So they were the 2 questions from the floor, David. And I think it was quite interesting to have a look at that variety of questions, because the first one, which came from a nice place, the woman who asked that was wanting to position herself as an influencer. She was very focused on that aspect of social media. So for her, the number of followers was top of her mind. I said, well, I actually don't know off the top of my head, because it's not something I fuss over.
Yeah, it's engagement that we focus on, because if we're getting good engagement, then we know that the message is landing with people and they're taking the time to respond, react, and engage. There's a reason why numbers get called vanity metrics. They're nice to have, but unless there's a following amount of engagement, and that engagement is leading to whatever your version of conversion is in your industry. Income opportunities, ability to put quotes out there. What's the point of tens of thousands of people if they don't lead to something?
Yeah. So that was interesting. And then the other question, I remember saying to her, look, with all great respect, The realm of bookkeeping, if you were just trying to talk about bookkeeping itself, is probably one of the greatest antidotes to insomnia known to humankind. It is a pretty boring practice, let's face it, compared to someone who is a racing car driver, for example. However, where there's absolute gold and where you are the least boring person on the planet is where you can arrive in my world when I am frozen with fear, panic, anger, pain, frustration, trying to get my best sorted, and like I did many, many years ago, and I used to do it myself, spending a fruitless weekend hunting for one receipt. You are the most magnificent person in all humankind. And that's where I'd be looking for some story potential, is how you come as that great big paracetamol tablet to my distress and just take the pain away.
Yep. Bookkeepers are the forklifts that lift the weight off our shoulders.
They are.
Bookkeepers are the people who have made peace with sitting in front of piles of paper or piles of electronic receipts for days to make sure they add up so we can either do business or do life. And there's something very visceral in that, and this is why we chose to put it at this point in today's episode, because if in doubt, if what you do, you're not really sure how to communicate it to other people, what's the physical experience of this thing you're talking about? What's the emotional experience? A bookkeeper might just be really serene and comfortable working on all this technical stuff. But what are your clients like? Do they desperately want to get rid of this work so they can go and sell, go and make, go and have half a day off with their family? You know, go and sit in the sun and read a great book. It really doesn't matter which of those things they want to do. But the reality is, a bookkeeper is making sure that people get more time back for things they're good at or enjoy. And that is a profoundly powerful marketing place to be.
And I think you'll find if you took that approach, it will all add up.
Boom, boom.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
Actually, David, before we leave the realm of money behind, having just been talking about bookkeeping, in the problem segment, I've got a question for you. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying, you take after the cents and the dollars will look after themselves. I think it used to be look after the pence and the pounds will look after themselves, or something of that ilk. It came up in conversation with us the other day and you went, absolutely not. Explain.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I've worked with too many clients now who focus on the small things today that will be the small things tomorrow, that will be the small things the day after, and put all their focus on that, but don't look up and see, but tomorrow might be different to today, and next week is likely to be a little bit different to today, and next month will be different again, and next year will be different again. The idea that you can look after the cents and the dollars will take care of themselves might be true in when you put money in the bank and get paid interest. That's nice. But in terms of running a business, you need to do both. You need to look at the small things to make sure they're done well, but you also need to look ahead, because otherwise, in the language of Gary Klein, one of the best corporate psychologists, if you're just focusing on the little things non-stop, you're refining errors. You're getting less and less errors each day, but you're getting less and less errors doing the same thing, which means when the world changes, you're utterly unprepared for that change. When an opportunity comes along, you're utterly looking in the wrong direction. So don't just pay attention to the cents. Please, please, please look up and go, where are the new dollars going to come from? Where are the different paths to the same dollars when the world changes? There is always a big picture that you need to look up and think about at least once a month. I would like you to do it more often, but if I could just get most people to put aside an hour a month to go, what's our market going to be like in a year's time? And where do I want our business to be in a year's time? You will make your future so much nicer, and you will make it so much easier for professionals like us to help you.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
Let's turn our attention in perspicacity to, well, let's keep in the accounting money world, because if we thought about well-known accountants who advertise, H&R Block are known around the world.
Sounds like a prison.
It does, doesn't it?
I'm going to H Block, you going to R Block? Let's dig a tunnel.
Perhaps we shouldn't say that in relation to accountants, because there's 1 or 2 of them probably in prison doing time.
Or their clients.
Yes, or their clients. So, look, they have their ads, because we were just talking earlier about the lady who was the bookkeeper and trying to find a way to communicate what we actually care about, because we don't care about how you do it. We just want that pain lifted off our shoulder. H&R Block, I think they've got the memo. They have a unique take on pushing a service they have, which is the instant tax return. Let's have a listen.
In life, some things are certain, like wanting your tax refund instantly. It's as certain as AI taking over. It's as certain as your long-lost father coming back the moment you finally make it.
It's me, Dada!
As certain as your ex texting you as soon as you find true love.
Bill, it's over.
Be certain this tax season. Ask about an instant refund from H&R Block.
So we started this episode talking about gut instinct. Can you get more guttural than just being driven by greed, David? I want the money, and I just want it now.
Yep. Greed plus bizarre comedy.
Yes.
It's a pretty wild combo. The greed on its own and how or why they can do it so quickly, good ad. Greed, no explanation of how and why, and comedy that isn't funny, just weird.
So they pass muster.
Yeah, ish. like greed is, well, it's not even greed, it's just, man, I have to do this thing, and they're getting the pain out the way, and they're getting me anything I'm going to get back fast. That on its own is valuable. And even if they did something like then had an accountant say, and here's how we do it for you, and then you could just have the voice from The Simpsons going blah, blah, blah for 5 seconds.
That would actually be better.
That would be a much better, that's comedy that would work.
Yes, because that is a truth.
Yeah, and what we want is something funny that we realise, yep, that's exactly how I feel. I just want them to do it, and I don't care how.
So if that lady who is the bookkeeper from the Polaris Centre is listening, she could actually use that approach to explaining how she does her bookkeeping. So she starts by talking about, that horrible pain, that dread every quarter to get to your tax returns done. How many hours do you waste? How much pain do you carry? Well, look, we do it for you. Here's how. Blah, 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 blah. Jing!
Pretty much. Or a variation where she just keeps talking and then one of us in the background goes, shh, bookkeeper, they've got the message. You're boring.
I'll let her choose which one she goes for. My wild creature animal thinks the first one is a little bit nicer than the second one.
My wild creature mind says wild creatures all over the world will go, the second one's true.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.